With respect to the Russian society, I don't think that people really care about America and Obama, because Russia has been hit so severely by the economic crisis, so people simply have been bogged down, into their own problems. But with respect to the Russian political class, it's different. They're talking about Obama, they're discussing Obama phenomena, and there are two kinds of reactions. On the one hand, when we are talking about the Kremlin and the Russian official pundit community, there is a kind of very controversial reaction. On the one hand, a lot of apprehension, a lot of concern, even doubts, because they simply do not know what Obama change does mean, and to what extent Democrats will repeat the experience of the previous American democratic administrations who cared about the values and standards. But on the other hand, there is a lot of hope on the part of the official Moscow, hope that Obama will restart the business as usual. That means will return to realpolitik and will start to count only the nuclear warheads. Because in view of the Russian political elite, this realpolitik means a very important, maybe key instrument to consolidate the Russian system and legitimize the system and give the possibility for the Russian political elite to feel themselves cocky as the real partner of the United States. But for the Russian political liberal minority, Obama, of course, means a chance for a new, much more flexible and at the same time sophisticated policy, dual-track policy, which will mean, on the one hand, engagement of Russia into various areas, and on the other hand, a kind of, attempt to influence Russia and push Russia towards some kind of transformation.
Russian expectations for the Obama administration are cautiously optimistic. There's a long list of issues on which both sides can cooperate. There's a long list of things in which both sides can help each other advance their national interests. The problem will be that I emphasize the caution part of the equation. Russia is likely to demand a high price for any significant cooperation. They might offer to help us more in Afghanistan or with Iran in exchange for dismantling the ABM plans and system in Poland, or even giving them a much more free hand in Ukraine or Georgia. These are very difficult policy questions our administration here will have to balance between national interest and pragmatism. To the extent that I know, the Obama administration has not yet decided these things, but it's a very, very tough call, because I fully expect the Russians to ask for a high price. I fully expect us to be put in a position where we're not going to have or be able to go as far as they want. And this is going to make, I suspect, over the long run, the relationship as complicated as it has been. So I emphasize the caution rather than the optimism.
The eras of cooperation are pretty known, and people on both sides, in the United States, in America, have been working on the agendas where the interests do coincide. First of all, it's nuclear security, conventional CFE, it's, of course, energy security, cooperation in the space area, finally, civil nuclear cooperation. So the agenda is pretty evident and apparent and has been worked on for a long time. At the same time, there are areas of contention, of course, and there are a lot of irritants. Among them, I would say, the neighboring state that surround Russia, then NATO expansion, of course, ABM, and let's to add to this, any issue, even the issue of agreement, issue of cooperation, could become the issue of contention in the situation when America and Russia build themselves on different standards. And in the situation when Russian political elite pursue the so-called paradigm to be with the United States, to be with the West, and to be against America, to be against the West, when Russian political elite is trying to use America and the West in general as one of the most important factors to mobilize the society on the anti-Western basis. In this situation, any issue could become the issue of contention until Russia transforms itself into a normal, liberal, democratic state.
The issues we should be watching for from the Russian point of view are an understanding on ABM, an understanding on the extension of the START strategic arms treaty, agreement on admission prospects for Ukraine and Georgia into NATO. Those I think are the primary ones. There's a lot of baggage that goes with it, which I don't think we will find very attractive. With regard to Ukraine, and pretty much the Russian long-term goal is to put Ukraine back in their sphere of influence. And they do have cards to play. As we've seen this week, they essentially cut a deal with the Kyrgyz leadership that would result in our expulsion from the Manas air base in Kyrgyzstan. There are a number of other counter pressures they can bring to bear, and I think we will almost certainly not go as far as they want. I would say probably a very improvement in terms of engagement on some issues where there can be cooperation. Anti-terrorism measures, nuclear proliferation, START treaty, probably are things I would look for signs of progress. But I think the long-term trajectory is not good. And as I said at the panel today, the long-term trajectory is not good, partly because of Russia's continued imperial ambitions, at least in Eurasia, and Russia's very difficult financial situation at home. The bottom line is no one really knows whether they will be more or less assertive as a result of the global financial crisis. Opinion, frankly, in Washington is split. But I think certainly, as we discussed today, they're likely to be more assertive in the Caucasus and Southeast Europe. And that's something we're going to have to take a strong stand on, because the question may well be, do we have something we want and pretty much kick Ukraine membership in NATO down the road for years, or do we stand by our principles and say, no, this thing is important to us? As far as I can tell here in Washington, the Obama people are talking about these things right now.
I would like, first of all, to persuade President Obama that the development of the Western democracy and the way America solves its own problems, especially during the crisis, would be a kind of example how liberal democracy works. So practice what you preach. That will be very important for the Russian society. And secondly, I will try to persuade President Obama that any cooperation and engagement of Russia in the security or any other field would be not that effective if Americans stop thinking about Russia's transformation, because untransformed Russia is always a spoiler, is always a potential opponent, and will always undermine any efforts at Russia's engagement. So I would suggest President Obama to think about the triad: engaging Russia, secondly, trying to offer Russia a transformational stimulus package, and thirdly, constraining the traditional part of the Russian political elite.